Hey guys, it's Selwen here, and finally bringing you the Unholy Decay. Again, got a lot of requests for this one, so I hope it is worth it. And as always, do leave a comment on why you love Unholy, which there's very little to dislike. It's such a great spec, man. So, what's it all about? Well, to first understand Unholy, you need to understand its resources, and as Unholy, you have two: runes and runic power. You possess 6 runes and you're gonna use them for 90% of your abilities, most costing 1 or 2 runes like Festering Strike. Each rune is gonna generate to you runic power, which is your second resource, having a cap of 140 or so, and each rune is gonna generate 10, with some abilities generating extra based on artifact traits and whatnot. Now, Festering Strike costs 2 runes, so it's gonna give you 20 runic power and deals reasonable damage. However, it will also generate Festering Wounds at random 2 to 4 for a max of 8, and they will take a big part on Unholy gameplay. Festering Wounds are a debuff that will simply stay on the target for a couple of seconds, but they can be burst to deal damage and generate 3 runic power to you. The way to do that is with Scourge Strike, dealing shadow and physical damage and bursting one of those wounds for that said extra damage and runic power. Besides that, there's also Outbreak, costing 1 rune and your main dot to go along with all of that, staying on the target for 6 seconds, spreading Virulent Plague, dealing damage over time and having a 30% chance to erupt to deal more damage all around the target. Your main AoE is Death and Decay, costing 1 rune, doing damage whoever is inside the circle, and improves your Scourge Strike to hit all targets while it's up. Death Coil will then be your main source to dump runic power, 45 to be exact, and restoring 10 energy to your pet. So your pet will also take a big part on your gameplay-ish. It will mostly just stay there dealing damage, but using Dark Transformation, one of your cooldowns, will empower it to deal more damage and AoE, and having a small chance to burst a Festering Wound. Your other main cooldown is Army of the Dead, on a huge cooldown of 10 minutes, and summoning an army of ghouls, and summon Gargoyle, a stronger pet, to deal damage over 40 seconds, on a 3-minute cooldown. Your artifact ability is Apocalypse, it's free to use, bursting 6 Festering Wounds in one go, and summoning a ghoul per wound burst, plus giving you 2 runes back on 1.5 minutes cooldown. And your passives will include Runic Corruption, having 1% chance per runic power spent to gain a buff to regenerate your runes 100% faster, so 45% chance per Death Coil. And Sudden Doom, your auto attacks have a chance to gain a proc to make your Death Coil free to use and stacks up 2 times. And finally, your Mastery increases your shadow damage. So all in all, you have your resources and its respective abilities to manage, your wounds, your dots, your pets, and procs to manage, which makes up for pretty amazing gameplay, although not the easiest, especially when we get to the talents. So there's quite a lot of nice choices here, and over the course of Legion, there's been multiple viable builds. Currently, all is focused around this talent right here called Dark Arbiter, replacing your Gargoyle, and every time you use a runic power, it increases its damage, plus its cooldown gets reduced to 2 minutes. So that's what I'm going to talk about mostly, and obviously the changes that are there for multi-target. There is an old build surrounding Soul Reaper and even the old crit build, but isn't as viable anymore, like I said. But if you really want to know it, you can watch my old guide from way back to 7.2 or 7.1 or something like that. So in the tier 1, Ebon Fever will be the clear winner here by increasing the damage of your Virulent Plague by 20% and deals damage in half of the duration, so it's gonna tick much faster. Second tier, for single target and rating, Pestilent Pustules will be great by giving you a rune after bursting 8 festering wounds at any point during the fight, so it does not need to be in a row and will grant you more sustainability. On the following tier, Unholy Frenzy will be great to increase your attack speed by 100% for 2.5 seconds after bursting a wound. Faster auto attack speed means more sudden doom procs, meaning more death coils to boost your Val'kyr, which is Dark Arbiter. Keeping it up is pretty easy since you burst wounds quite regularly. Next tier, it shouldn't really matter since it's supposed to be for utility like the slow or stun here, but Val'kyr, transforming your ghoul into Abomination, will actually provide a slight DPS increase and give you an extra grip. Following tier is pure situational, either for more mobility, stronger anti-magic shell, or a shield, so choose what you prefer. Tier 6, Shadow Infusion will be best against as it provides a great synergy with your other talents, since Death Coil is going to reduce the cooldown of Dark Transformation while it's not active by 7 seconds. As for Infected Claws, is also a safe bet now, as long as you're not using Convergence of Fates. It will make the Alliance easier since it makes the cooldown of Dark Transformation back to the 1 minute cooldown as opposed to the dynamic one that you get with Shadow Infusion, and it will give you more festering wounds as your pets will also apply them at random. All in all, they are pretty even, so figure out by yourself what works best for you. And lastly, obviously, Dark Arbiter that I just talked about. Now, for Mythic Plus, you can perfectly use this setup and it will work fine. Your AoE will still be decent from your Plagues and Scourge Strike AoE with Death and Decay, and it will have great single target damage. But if you want that extra AoE damage, you can start making some choices. So on tier 1, Bursting Swords can be amazing for your wounds to deal more damage and cleave all around. On itself, I don't recommend simply because Ebon Fever is so good, but with the class ring, you can take both, making it a great choice for Mythic Plus. On tier 2, Blighted Rune Weapon can also work for Mythic Plus in an interesting way since it applies to wounds per auto attack up to 10, I believe. You can spread your wounds nicely on all targets to then burst them when you are about to AoE with Scourge Strike and Death and Decay. And if you have Bursting Swords, it will be an amazing combo. But again, Pestilent Pustules will work fine, especially for more sustainability. Epidemic is cool, it provides a really good AoE burst on 3 charges, so works nicely for Mythic Plus as well, but uses a rune which can prevent you from using your other abilities. More on that in the rotation bit. So I generally recommend the other 2, with Pestilent Pustules providing you a safer choice, let's put it that way. On the next tier, Unholy Frenzy is fine again, it works, but since it's meant as something that you want to keep up in combination with your Dark Arbiter for all of those death coils, for content like Mythic Plus where you're just going from trash pack to trash pack, for the most part it won't give you as great of a benefit, so taking Clawing Shadows is a choice that you can consider, replacing Scourge Strike, and it's purely based on shadow damage, so it deals more damage because of your mastery, plus gives a 30-yard range, which can be useful. Infected Claws on tier 6 will also benefit you in an interesting way, especially combined with Bursting Swords, to once again provide more wounds to burst, this time they when it come from your pets. Again, more on the rotation. And lastly, if you took all of those different choices, taking Dark Arbiter probably won't be that worthwhile anymore, and in Mythic Plus you really only want to use it for bosses, which is great for Tyrannical, but otherwise you probably want a more AoE approach, like I said. So Defile will be a pretty good choice, replacing your Death and Decay to deal much more damage, and increases your mastery while inside of it, so increasing most of your damage as well, like your wounds, dots, Clawing Shadows. And if you can get your hands on your Lego Helm, Death Coil will also reduce its cooldown, which is great. So overall, mainly getting Bursting Swords with the class ring, either of these, Clawing Shadows and Infected Claws and Defile, will give you a great synergy to really pull some nice AoE numbers and have a blast doing it, which is very important. With all of that, let's move over to your rotation, and there's a lot to cover here, a lot of management to take in mind with each ability, and some will really depend on a situation. So I will try and go step by step on a couple of abilities like wounds, runic power, then cooldowns and stuff like that, and hopefully by the end all will be cohesive enough. So let's start to what you're gonna do all the time with this build. In general, all is gonna be centered around Dark Arbiter, alright? And your rotation will change outside of it, inside of it, and in preparation for it. So let's start with how your rotation will look like outside of it, and what's the preparation we want to do for it, and then go over the cooldowns and how to use it and all of that. So first thing is your dot, Virulent Plague. It's simple to use it once and just reapply it when needed, so below 3 or 2 seconds. Now most of what you're gonna do outside of your cooldowns is bursting those wounds and just overall management of resources and procs. So you're just gonna use Festering Strike to apply those said wounds. So you're just gonna use it below 4 wounds, but not if above it. Remember, it generates at random 2 to 4, so you don't want to be using Festering Strike at 5 wounds, for an example, or you might get 4 and one of them goes to waste, so remember that. If you get 2 or 3, feel free to use another, so use 1 or 2 Festering Strikes to begin with. Then you need to start bursting those said wounds, so with Scourge Strike. Scourge Strike in turn is only to be used to burst those wounds, never without them. So feel free to use Scourge Strike now, taking in mind that your Virulent Plague might need refresh. Now all of those abilities are also generating runic power, right? Because you're consuming runes. Plus bursting wounds gives you a little extra. Now that's fine, but you don't want to be in a situation where you are capped with runic power. So enter Death Coil. Death Coil is a very important ability to you. For the most part, you're going to be using it to dump runic power, so when near the cap, use it. So you can keep building and bursting those wounds, or use it to obviously when you don't have any runes to spend and you have no other ability to use besides Death Coil itself. But you also get 2 things with it, which are your Sudden Doom procs, which I already have up, and the Scourge of Worlds. Sudden Doom procs without taking Dark Arbiter in mind, you're just gonna use them when you would use a Death Coil anyway, so at near cap, but you would simply need to use 2 to dump the runic power since one of those would be free, or when you are empty of runes, like before. Remember that you can get 2 stacks of it, so if you get a proc, you don't need to use it right away, since if you get another, that will stack up. That said, you don't also want to be in a situation that you are sitting at the 2 stacks for too long, so keep a lookout for that. As for Scourge of Worlds, it's a debuff that has a chance to apply every time you use a Death Coil, increasing the damage of your Scourge Strike does to the target, about 35% or so. Now, it won't change much to your rotation, it will simply increase the priority to your Scourge Strike slightly. So in a situation where you could use a Festering Strike because you under 4 wounds, or you can use another Death Coil, but if you have a Scourge of Worlds up, Scourge Strike would take a slight priority to take advantage of that small damage window. That said, using Scourge Strike without the wounds, even with this buff, is still out of the question. Now, the Sudden Doom procs can obviously apply it as well, so you use those procs even without near the cap or even with runes active, so right before you are about to burst wounds, to get a chance of getting that buff for your Scourge Strikes to deal more damage. You can also do it without a proc, but in general you want to keep that runic power high for when you use Dark Arbiter or even Dark Transformation, but if the cooldown is long way off, you can freely use it and get that little extra damage, or at least a chance at it. Besides that, you also get Runic Corruption from it, but nothing to worry about, it will just help with your rune regeneration, so that's why you want to use it when you have new runes as well. And lastly, if you're using the Legendary Chest, which is extremely popular, you just want to fit in that Chains of Ice, alright? It stacks up every 2 seconds, so use it above 14 stacks or so, taking a higher priority than wound bursting. Now, that's pretty much how most of your rotation is gonna play out. For the most part, it's just building and bursting wounds and weaving in Death Coil with the proc or without the proc to get the Scourge of Worlds and get Runic Corruption and all of that. Now, that will change a bit before using your cooldowns, so your opener and anytime you are about to use them and during their window. So let's talk about them. So when opening up, you're gonna get a variety of different cooldowns to use, and of course you have to set up your Dark Arbiter properly. The only thing that will change here will be your Lego shoulders and chest again, which practically all Unholy DKs use if they have them, but I'll talk about with it and without them. So right before starting up the fight, so before the pull, be a raid boss or a dungeon one, you can precast your Army of the Dead. Since it costs 3 runes, it will give you a brief time to get them back right before you start up a fight, so you don't go so empty. Or you can use it mid-fight if it's impossible to precast, like certain bosses where you end up pulling everything. Mr. Zine. That said, it might give you a slight DPS increase to use it after, so right before your Dark Arbiter that you're gonna do soonish, to allow your ghouls to get a couple more hits in there and also getting that little extra runic power that depletes while you are out of combat, so on that pre-pull phase. But it also might make you drive runes when you need them, so see if it works for you. If you have any decent gear, you should be fine doing it this way, as it's the better way. Overall, you are able to use it 1 time per fight and it will deal pretty good damage. That's about it. It looks cool as shit though. Now, as it's about to be pulled, you can also use Dark Transformation if without the Lego shoulders. If you have them equipped, save it for later. Then you're just gonna apply your Outbreak Virulent Plague and keep it up like before. Now, the way Dark Arbiter works is that it will last for 20 seconds and any runic power that you spend during its duration will vastly increase its damage. So the idea here is to pull, so stack up as much runic power as humanly possible to use when you activate it, and if possible, sudden doom procs. Even though they are free, it counts towards Dark Arbiter anyway. So what you're gonna do is delay Dark Arbiter, okay? So don't use it on pull and build that runic power first. Besides that, you also have another cooldown to set up, Apocalypse. It will also summon ghouls and consumes 6 wounds right off the bat, so you're gonna stick to those old priorities. So you still want to use Festering Strike 2 to be exact and hopefully get 6+ wounds. Problem is, it's random, so you might get unlucky and get 4 or 5, so you're just gonna have to wait until you can use another Festering Strike. Most of the time though, you will reach the 6. Then you pop your Apocalypse. It will give you 2 runes back, which will help you next. Follow that with your Chains of Ice, if with the Lego chest. Then, if at 90+ runic power or close to that, is when you finally use Dark Arbiter. If you're not anywhere near that runic power, fit in an extra Festering Strike to reach it, or refresh a Virulent Plague, which you should try and do anyway before using Dark Arbiter, so you don't have to refresh it during its duration. Once it's active, you finally go for your Dark Transformation if you haven't before, because the Lego shoulders are gonna boost all of your pets, including Dark Arbiter, and now you have your Army of the Dead, your Apocalypse Ghouls, and your Dark Arbiter all set up, and your runic power, so it's the best time to use it. Now, during your Val'kyr window, your priorities are gonna change, because like I said, runic power is gonna increase its damage. So your priority here is just to use and spam Death Coil. With the procs, without the procs, doesn't matter, just fit in as much Death Coils as you can. When you are out of runic power, you're either gonna use Festering Strike if below 5 wounds, or Scourge Strike to burst them to get more runic power for more Death Coils. All the other management kind of goes away during it, like the Scourge of Worlds thing, so forget all about that. Just focus on getting as much runic power as fast as you can without overcapping wounds, and spam Death Coil. And do that until Val'kyr ends. So that's essentially how it's gonna go for your opener, and anytime you use Dark Arbiter, always preparing runic power to be used with it. So after that goes down, you go back to your normal rotation that I talked about before. Now, what about the uses of Dark Transformation and Apocalypse? Well, Apocalypse is to be used with Dark Arbiter because it provides a big chunk of runic power and gives you the runes as well, so it's great to go along with it. Problem is, the cooldown isn't shared unless you're using something like Convergence of Fates, but if you're not, you just delay it so it matches. As for Dark Transformation, just use it on cooldown, alright. Remember that Death Coil is going to reduce its cooldown when the transformation isn't active, so you should be able to use it twice before your second Dark Arbiter, okay? If with Infected Claws, the cooldown is flat 1 minute, so just use it once without Dark Arbiter, and then the next one combo with it, just like in your opener. And remember to always use it after you summon your Val'kyr and your Apocalypse Ghouls, so again they get boosted by Lego Shoulders damage increase thing. But besides that, keep a normal rotation until about 10 seconds of Dark Arbiter to come ready, so there you want to start your preparation for it, stockpiling that runic power like before for the Death Coils, and if possible Sudden Doom, at least 1 stack, if possible the 2. Dark Transformation to go with it for the Lego Shoulders and Apocalypse. As for Chains of Ice, with the Lego chest again, use anytime above 14 stacks, okay? And that covers it all. Essentially, it's just a lot of management. It takes a while to get everything right, but when you do, it feels so amazing. As for your multi-target rotation, will depend on what build you're using. Your priorities will shift here a bit, but using Dark Transformation on cooldown and keeping up a Virulent Plague will be your utmost priority. Remember your pet AoEs as well then. Now, your Patent Plague will do great AoE on its own, but you can improve it with Death and Decay or Defile. So the way you want to use it is, first, you're gonna apply your wounds on as many possible targets. So tap targeted them and just keep on using those Festering Strikes on all different targets. And then, right before using your Scourge Strike, you pop Death and Decay or Defile, and then they will cleave all around, bursting every single wound. Now this feels and is great, but can be even better if you spec into Infected Claws and Bursting Swords with the Lego Ring and Defile, because then your pet AoEs, while transformed, will also apply wounds on all nearby targets, that you will be able to AoE burst with Scourge Strike or Clawing Shadows if you spec into that as well. That combines with the Bursting Swords that makes your wounds also cleave, will be an AoE galore or an STD fast if you will. If you have Epidemic, use in between all of that just to get something extra, and if you with Blighted Rune Weapon, what you're gonna do is activate it and then just keep a normal rotation really, and tap targets to different targets as you can, just like the Festering Strike, just wait for the auto attack to go through to apply those 2 wounds on as many targets as you can to once again burst with your Defile plus Flying Shadows / Scourge Strike combo. Death Coil takes the least priority here, but you still want to use it to avoid capping runic power, but remember your Defile increases your mastery as well, so saving your Death Coil for its last seconds of the buff that it gives, so when that mastery buff is really at its highest, will be a DPS increase to use your Death Coils then. Then after the Defile goes down and you're just gonna try and burst single wounds, but then when the cooldown is about ready to come back up, you want to start preparing for it. So there's still 5 seconds to go on it. You want to immediately be spreading all of those wounds to then burst them again with the AoE, alright? As for Apocalypse, use, if needed, that 6 wound burst with Bursting Swords, make for a pretty good AoE burst. And that covers it, pretty much. Oh, your ghouls also AoE when they die, so Army of the Dead or the Apocalypse ones. It's hard to do, but you can time it in such a way that they will explode when you really want them, but it's really hard to time, so don't really think about that too much. If it happens, it happens. And besides all of that, you also have your anti-magic shell, as it gives you runic power when you absorb magic damage. So use it as much as you can whenever to get that extra damage, even if you have to take slight magic damage for it, but might be able to get an extra Death Call in there, especially during the Dark Arbiter window, as long as you don't cause a wipe. As for mobility, I know it sucks, but do the best you can with it. Save your Wraith Walk when you need it the most, and don't use it mindlessly. Now, as for stats, and then to wrap up. So stats in Unholy will come down to 2 big ones, which is Mastery and Haste. For the most part, Mastery will be your priority to increase your shadow damage, practically all of your abilities besides half of Scourge Strike and Festering Strike, which are physical. Rest is all shadow, meaning it scales pretty goddamn well with all of your abilities, even with your Val'kyr or your Lego chest ability. As for haste, will benefit you as well and will go hand in hand with your mastery. Haste will allow you to fit more global cooldowns during your Dark Arbiter window, so more death coils and runic power, plus improves your rune regeneration. Now, to know which one is your priority at certain points will kind of work as sort of breakpoints. Once you reach a certain amount of mastery, it will require you to get a little bit more haste to increase your DPS. And then when you reach that point, you need to get more mastery, and then you need to get more haste, and so on and so on. As you can see on the screen, there's some breakpoints. Don't focus on them too much, just kind of focus on improving your character, item level, mastery mainly. And simming will always tell you for sure on these things, so remember to get on raid bots and do your stat weights, alright? As for the rest, crit is pretty close to haste. You want some, usually keeping it around 15 to 17% is enough. And then versatility and strength are your least valuable for the most part. This might change as strength might be close to mastery if you're really undergeared. So again, sim and sim. All in all, Unholy is a joy to play, both gameplay-wise and visually. It's always satisfying bursting those nasty bubbles of pus that are your festering wounds. I know it sounds disgusting, but it's amazing. And spreading your diseases everywhere, it just feels awesome. Add that up with all the setups and planning that you have to do, almost constantly thinking on your next step to have everything running perfectly, you really feel like this master of death and disease, or an horseman, or, well, a death knight. And as always guys, that covers it all. I hope it helps. Like and subscribe for more videos like this. Remember to comment on why you love Unholy. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.